Welcome to Discernment Radio. I'm your host, Danielle Pailly.
And I'm your host, Cindy Riednauer. We are Discernment Radio, people and topics to enhance your life.
Today we are joined by Teresa Beshwate. Teresa is a successful aging coach and founder of Aging on Purpose, a company dedicated toward helping boomers conquer their fear of age-related decline and create a life of vitality and purpose. Teresa Beshwate is also a presenter, writer, and associate certified coach through the International Coach Federation. The topic today is Age Well on Purpose. Create your future on your terms. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's an honor. Thanks for having me.
So, Teresa, I've had the privilege of knowing you and your work for many years, but for those just tuning in, can you talk a little bit about the inspiration behind your company, Aging on Purpose?
Well, Danielle, so many people accept decline as a normal part of aging. And yet the research for decades has proven that that's not true. And so I think there's such an opportunity to use coaching to help people really shape their future and chart their course to their ideal aging journey.
In the work that Danielle and I do, we meet a lot of people who refer to themselves as coaches, but they don't always mean the same thing. Can you tell us about your approach to coaching?
Indeed, Cindy, there's such a wide variety out there. And for me, the approach assumes that the client is absolutely the expert in their own life. And while I will share the science of successful aging, the application of that science is really where the rubber meets the road. And that can only be done by the client being the expert in their own life. So for me, it's a mix of here's what decades of science is telling us, but the application is really about you and what's right for you. So it's not certainly not me dictating what's right or wrong, but the client themselves deciding what's best for them in their life.
And even that, I imagine, would take some coaching, because do you find that you work with people who are just like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it?
Absolutely. But my truth is not their truth and my life is not their life. And so, those questions I always defer back to, the client. And that's partly building that confidence, Danielle, that they absolutely have what it takes to shape their future, chart their course, and really change their life, change their trajectory. It's very, very possible.
So do you find that the people that come to you are already in a positive state of mind where they want to do this, or do you get resistance?
I think that people, by and large, who come to me, they are not, they are realists, I'll say. They know that they're aging, Cindy. So they're not denying that. And they want to do it on their terms. Mm-hmm. And so I would describe them as purposeful, realists, probably. And I wouldn't say that I get resistance. I think, the ideal client who wants to be coached knows that it's time to grow. They want to grow, and change is part of growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So on your website, you mentioned that 70% of physical aging and 50% of mental aging is based on lifestyle and not genetics. And this is really different from what a lot of us have been told growing up. So can you talk more about the research that made this groundbreaking discovery?
Absolutely, Cindy. It started in the early 80s. And that's surprising to me because it hasn't, in some ways, been very well disseminated, and it certainly hasn't been widely adopted either. But it started with Dr. Jonas Salk, who noticed that one 82-year-old is on cross-country skis and another 82-year-old needs help with activities of daily living. And so what's the difference, and why hadn't to date that been studied? Because all of the research at that time was focused on disease and decline. And so the MacArthur Foundation at that time took Dr. Salk up on his challenge and funded a decade of research about what can go right with aging, and what they learned forever changes what we knew about aging. And this was around the early 90s. And what they discovered is exactly what you said, Cindy. 70% of physical aging is based on the lifestyle choices that we make every day, meaning today and every other day, and then 50% of cognitive aging. The other critical finding was that it's never too late to start making these changes, and small changes truly can produce big results. And so much research, we call it watershed research. So much research has followed that only backs up those original findings. And they're very exciting, because you don't have to go run a marathon in order to age in a better way.
That's good.
Yes.
I'm a moderate exerciser all the way.
Good. And that goes such a long way. You don't have to be extreme in any way. And certainly to the marathoners out there, good for you. And it's wonderful. It's just that many people don't have run a marathon on their bucket list. And if running marathons were the only way to age, ideally, I think it would be a deal breaker for many people. And the truth is that it doesn't take that. It takes very small, purposeful decisions every single day.
And I wanted to mention that Jonas Salk, people are listening to that. And yes, you're talking about the Jonas Salk who came up with the polio vaccine, correct?
The one and only. Yes.
What amazing contributions. So this is where I'm always the one that takes us to the dark places on our on our podcast. And I always make it about me. So here we go. I know for me personally, this is the first time in my life where I'm beginning to notice age-related changes in a more dramatic way. And Will be 47 in September.
And she's the child in the room.
But if I'm being honest, I don't like it. My whole life has been about becoming stronger and smarter and more successful. And all of a sudden I'm noticing, my hearing's weaker, my eyesight is poorer. There's like extra lines on my face, weight that's really hard to take off. So, it sometimes feels like my choice is deny it, like you see a lot of people doing, or just get depressed about it. Now, everything that you're saying is there's another way. So what can someone like me do, and other people who are listening to this saying, yeah, I feel the same way?
Mm-hmm. They say you can get bitter or you can get better. And if I know you, Danielle, you're going to go for the better. But it's so interesting that you mentioned this, because truly, this concept of aging optimally, or as the research calls it, successful aging, to do that at this juncture, we truly cannot settle for being a diminished version of our former selves, our younger selves. Yeah. And it requires new skills. It's so interesting. It requires different skills to navigate these next chapters than it did for the previous chapters. And so we essentially outgrow the strategies that used to work for us. And you may be feeling that at nearly age 47, Danielle. Other people experience that at different ages. How we feel about anything is really a product of what we're thinking. So if we can examine our thoughts, we can really choose to think anything we want to think about any topic, including these signs of aging. And we can choose different thoughts that serve us better, perhaps, that create different feelings, that create different actions, that ultimately create different results in our life. And so I would go back and I would offer that, thinking about what we're thinking about is the key to start to understand better some of those feelings. And that's some of the work that we do. That's not, that's a pretty high level, Danielle. But another thought is look to the older people, those people in your life that have decades more experience than you, those people that you really look up to. And when you look at them, do you see frailty, wrinkles, poor hearing, extra pounds, or or not? What do you see?
Yeah, and I usually see a beautiful person and I think they're lovely just the way they are. And funny, you can see other people as beautiful, and that's harder to see that when you notice things in yourself.
And that's the work of coaching, right? Helping us. Part of it is helping us be as kind to ourselves as we are to our friends.
So can you give us just a real quick example of if Danielle came to you with this kind of mindset, what would be the first thing you'd say back to her?
I would ask her to download her thoughts onto a piece of paper, Cindy.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a full-time job, clearly, but especially in Danielle's case. But writing down the thoughts that are happening, because we aren't always even aware of those thoughts. So documenting all the thoughts that are happening, maybe just on this topic, and then choosing the thoughts that serve her and deleting the thoughts that don't. We absolutely can think on purpose. We should.
Mm-hmm. So do you find when most people come to you with these issues and they want to live a more purposeful life, does a lot of it center around health or their appearance, or is it more life issues, or is it just a combination of everything?
I think it's a wide range of so many of those things. It's so interesting that we get to a point in life where we've never been more experienced, we've never been smarter. We don't have those tyrannies of what we should do. Life isn't prescribing our role for us maybe so much anymore, and we have so much choice. So you could think of it as like this encore performance that no previous version of yourself would have ever been prepared to deliver. And yet we find ourselves in a place where society says, you're devalued. Your mind is devalued. Your body is devalued. Yes. And so I think that's why it takes different skills to navigate that chapter. And yet it can be the best chapter ever. People, older adults are happier than anyone else. And so I think it's just navigating those waters. And so I would say it's a wide variety of reasons that people seek coaching.
Well, number one, thank you for the mini coaching session. And I will spend some more time with my thoughts. But I found that I was sparked when you said that you have to develop new skills. Because to me, now that's a challenge. I can do something that I can become better at that maybe I couldn't do before this time in my life. So thank you for that. I love that.
So I was listening to the television the other day, and some of the political candidates, because there's such a wide range in their age, were talking about ageism and feeling that they were going to be discriminated against because they were quite a bit older, in their 70s. So what would you say to that?
Oh, it's everywhere, isn't it? Such and such is too old to run for president. And I think that's our society saying old is bad and young is good. And our society simply believes that aging is about decline. So if that's what you believed and you knew that a president would, need to be in office for 4 years, they're going to just decline that whole time because they're aging. So it's really interesting to see. And it came up last election too. It always seems to come up. And it's, I think, evidence, Cindy, that society doesn't realize that aging is really about choice, not the year you were born, not your genetics. It's largely about choice. 70% is a huge number. And so, it's great evidence, unfortunately, of the rampant ageism in our society. And it's a good time for us to start to realize that, one 82-year-old is not the same as another. So it's a great time to teach and learn about ageism. And there's really some powerful advocates out there now talking about ageism. It's always been known as the last acceptable form of discrimination in our society. And that certainly is evident in the greeting card aisle. Good grief. You can't buy a nice birthday card that is honoring someone. I think it's nearly impossible. And I think that's an entrepreneur opportunity there, personally. But it's absolutely epidemic in our society, and there's some powerful people whose voices are starting to change that. And I think, presidential elections are maybe an opportunity to start to have people realize that aging is not just about the number. Chronological age really matters very little.
So, all three of us are women who are entrepreneurs, and research suggests that women are expected to have reached their career plateau somewhere in their mid-40s, even though I know none of us have any plans of stopping. And ageism in the career world post-50 is especially evident for women. So from your experience, what would you say that we as a culture need to do to overcome these expectations that society tries to set for us?
It's a good question, Cindy. It's a deep question. It's absolutely a reality. I was just talking to someone who was job hunting at age 60. And interestingly, this is a person who could pass for 45. Mm-hmm. And yet she really struggled to find a job. And she was sharing that, her resume has certain dates that imply her age. And she really struggled to find work. And it is absolutely a reality. Mm-hmm. And it's not okay. It's a symptom of ageism, absolutely. And I would also say that on the other side, one element of that is staying workforce ready. It's always learning and always growing and following what's trending, so that you don't fall into a stereotype of someone who's older. And I think there's interesting ways to get into the workforce. If you're trying to re-enter the workforce, ask to be a volunteer, ask if you can be an intern, different approaches so that people get to know you and not your age.
Mm-hmm. Good advice.
And not only that, and I struggle with this, I've in the past helped people with their resumes. And when I see a date that gives their age away, in the past, I've said, take that date off and just, and don't even address it. And to me, now that I look back on that, I'm kind of buying into that and saying it's okay. How do we get past that where people can say, this is who I am, this is my age, this is my experience, and get people to see past that is the huge challenge.
Because the information is out there on the internet anyway. Anybody that Googles anybody's name sees their age immediately.
It's true. And so the challenge becomes how to stand out from the crowd, and despite or because of your age. Do you remember the movie The Intern?
Yes.
Quite a few years ago. He applied with a video application, for the internship. So immediately stood out. So how can we stand out and among all the other candidates and actually help the workforce understand that it will benefit from our knowledge, from decades of experience. And, I don't mean to pretend that every person with decades of experience under their belt is wise. We're all different, but by and large, decades of experience is very valuable, I think. Mm-hmm. And so helping them to understand what's in it for them because of those decades of experience while staying workforce ready and owning that responsibility to be workforce ready and know what's trending and always learning.
That is so key because, and people assume when they talk to me on the phone that I'm about 20 years younger because I stayed on top of technology, and people assume that you're going to stop with Atari and dial-up internet. I don't know why they make that assumption, but and that's a key piece of advice of just continuing to learn and making sure in your industry what's out there, what do you need to know, and never settle for I've always done it this way.
That's right. And really nothing is rocket science besides rocket science. So it's believing that you can learn anything you set your mind to, that you have time to really study. Again, it goes back to our own thoughts. I'm too old to do this. I could never learn that. It is a long way from believing and choosing a thought that's different, choosing that thought of, I can learn anything I set my mind to.
Mm-hmm. So you've spoken very openly in your writing about becoming a widow at an early age and your path through this tremendous loss. How has your experience changed your perspective about life? And how would you approach someone who may have come through a traumatic experience and is trying to move forward?
Well, Cindy, a friend of mine said, and she was also widowed at a young age, and I would say she's probably been a widow about 10 years longer than I have. And she looked me in the eyes and she said, Teresa, it makes you a better person.
Mm.
And I said, then where do I sign up to be the lesser person?
Yeah,
Yes.
That's not the way you want to get it.
That's a great answer.
Where is the sign-up sheet? And the good/bad news is there is no sign-up sheet. And it's so interesting in our society, kind of society bashing today, I guess, but our society doesn't know. They're not grief savvy. We are not grief savvy as a society. We're not trained in how to help someone who's grieving. And so we have a wide variety as a society of reactions. And there's probably a million articles written about what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. And some of them are very conflicting. So if you really wanted to be a good friend, you'd probably be fairly confused about what you should or shouldn't say or do. So it's tricky for everybody. But I would say for me, there was one person in my life who accurately could see where I was and chose not to try to coax me into what they perceived should be the next place of my healing, but instead chose to keep me company in exactly the spot that I was in.
Wow.
And that is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, many, many friends and family who made great efforts to try to help. And the truth is, keeping me company in exactly the spot that I was in was the best way to be a friend to me. And I think that's probably true of so many people. We strive for the right words. Well, guess what? Words fail. There are no words. And I'm a hugger, so know that I'm a hugger. But to me, just a silent hug said a million things.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that everyone's not a hugger, but people really struggle for the words. And the truth is, there are no words. So, Cindy, I don't know if that completely answered your question.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer.
It does. And I find it must be challenging. Number one, everybody's grief process is different. I know when I lost my parents, I don't think I even acknowledged it for a year. Like I felt like I was numb and some people grieve right away. So knowing where people are and then, the people who say, oh, get over it because they feel like you should have moved forward faster. And, just I think being in a place where knowing that everybody's process is different. The question I would have for you is, to me, in that situation, I would want to curl up under the covers and not be bothered with anybody. So how do you be there for somebody who may be shutting everybody out?
Grief makes no sense. I don't think, Danielle. There's people will talk about different stages. It is not linear. Everyone goes through different things. It makes no sense. The first year, a lot of people will say the second year is actually the hardest year. And I think as a society, we think once you've hit the 1 year mark and experienced all the first, that you should be over it, right? Through it. Mm-hmm. And the truth is there's no over it or through it. There's just moving ahead with it. And that's very different. It's a very different concept. It doesn't mean we never heal. It just means I think that we become that next version of ourselves. And it's a part of us. It's a part of us. So it is unique to everyone. And how do you help? I think you, as a friend, you invite and you invite and you invite and know that they probably won't show, but there's a sense of comfort in being thought of.
Yeah.
A really good friend of mine invited me, probably 10 times over for dinner. And I just didn't have the energy. And she kept inviting me and she was never offended or hurt that I rarely could gather up the energy to go. And this is my best friend.
Yeah.
So I think, I've had people, I live in the country and there's a real sense of village and community. And so people would, I travel for work and people would roll in and chop all my weeds and haul them off. And never could I find anyone who would fess up.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, it's tricky because, don't say, call me if you need anything, but see if you can figure out what is needed and show up. If a person now needs to figure out how to fix sprinklers and, things like that, take them to the hardware store, go with them, just be present with them.
And that's such a great point, because it's not the act of taking them to the hardware store. It's the fact that you're showing up for that person in the way that they need. And it's that emotional support in a way that nobody would think that going to the hardware store or pulling weeds would be a big deal. And you're talking about it now years later because it had such an impact on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so true. I can't imagine how many hardware store employees have hugged a crying widow and been completely ill-equipped, for that. I went once with the goal of not crying and I stood in the sprinkler section and just studied the offerings. And then I left, and that was a pretty big accomplishment that day. So, depending on the person and their circumstances, do they know how to cook? Do they know how to do what now needs to be done, which is now all on them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about Age Well on Purpose, your program about creating your future on your terms.
Yeah, it's a group coaching offering, and group coaching can be so fun because it builds community. We're talking about society and their incorrect beliefs about aging, and a group is a group of like-minded people. So it's like instant community. So if you've not experienced group coaching, I'm a fan. It's also typically quite a bit more affordable than one-on-one coaching. And so Age Well on Purpose, create your future on your terms is really a lot about what we've been talking about today, developing into that encore, that person who can give that encore performance and getting those new skills and charting those new waters. And so, first we talk about what aging on purpose, that lifestyle would look like for each person. And so, being clear about what we want. And then it's about the concept of Kaizen, small steps. So we identify some very easy ways to get a taste of your goals right away. And then we really dig into that simple and yet very powerful method of examining our thoughts and choosing our feelings, and therefore creating certain actions that create the results that we want. So ultimately, it's about creating a lifestyle plan. We plan for so many things, but do we really plan for the aging experience that we want to live? And we lay out the specific actions to get there. So it's a very fun group of like-minded people, all sort of charting their course to their future.
And I think people crave that. It's funny when you think of group coaching, I suspect a lot of people go toward the TV show with the group therapy, and they'll say, I don't need that, because they're thinking, oh, therapy, something's wrong with me. And group coaching is something completely different. It's
true.
What's right with you. And I've noticed, and I think people crave it. Like even in meditation workshops, I now have to have the disclaimer that whatever is shared in the group, we understand that we're going to honor and respect people, not give advice, and just kind of listen. Because sometimes someone will come out of a meditation and they'll talk about some experience, and then somebody else will say, I've had that in my own life, and it sparks a conversation. So I think as a culture, we crave that connection.
We do. We crave people who will really listen to us, I think. So many people don't know how to listen. You can see them thinking about the next thing they're going to say instead of listening. And that's very common. And I think that's one thing that people crave. And people crave that partner who believes in them truly and believes that they are the expert of their life. It helps the client gain confidence, and then just to have that sense of community, to celebrate the wins, and honestly, to discuss the fails. Like, if we're not failing, then what are we learning? So it is about failing forward. And let's talk about the failures. In what ways did we fail this week? Why not talk about that? We learn more from the failures anyway. So that sense of community, I think, is so powerful.
That's so funny. I just had a flashback to my first time in college where this kid came into class and he's like, I get all A's and I'm a 4.0, blah, blah, blah. And the teacher said, well, then you're not trying hard enough. Obviously, you're not taking classes that challenge you enough. And then the kid was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Like, you just thought, this is, I've reached the pinnacle.
Oh, it's so true. The people I'm drawn to in life, without me really knowing it, the people who I want to talk with and be with are the people who have been through the worst of situations in life. And so my friend was right. It makes you a better person. And I think failure makes you a better person. Loss makes you a better person. Difficulties make you a better person. I don't want to hang around the person that's complaining about the weather. I think the people who have really navigated the most difficult waters in life are the most positive, wise, wonderful people. And that's who I want to be with. So I think as painful as it all is, and we want to be comfortable at all times, right? We want to avoid pain. But as difficult as some of those challenges are, they make the most beautiful, wonderful, resourceful, resilient, growth-oriented people.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And you've made me feel so good about my failures. I feel like I'm such a richer person now.
So, Teresa, where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
My website, Cindy, is agingonpurpose.com. I love writing, so I do a lot of blogging there.
Excellent.
And I also blog for the 60andMe community, which is 60andme.com. So either of those places. And I have also a Facebook page by the same name, Aging on Purpose.
Wonderful.
Teresa Beshwate, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for listening to Discernment Radio. If you like the show, please click to follow.